Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Eamon. Um, I am Robin from Arcana Talent. And I suppose I want to start out by just saying I can't stress enough how important getting the right talent on board is at all stages of growth, but particularly at early stage and scaling. Brian Fink summed it up pretty well when he said, vision without talent execution is noise. Most founders are very, very loud, but the ones who recruit brilliantly are the ones history remembers. We've got 40 minutes and I want to make sure every minute of that kind of counts. So honestly, there's no theory, no slides, in my opinion, you'll never look at again. And really, I think you'll leave with at least one thing you can do differently this week that has no cost attached to it at all. Before we get into it though, you may well ask who I am to think I can tell you a bit about your hiring strategy. So I have 25 years in staffing and talent. I was managing director of a part of the Harvey Nash group called Spinks, and we focused exclusively on startups and scale-ups. And we worked with some of these organizations like Net-a-Porter, Multiverse, Ovo Energy, when they were for much, much smaller organizations, and actually helped them on their scaling journey. Subsequent to that, I set up Arcana last year, and I've been helping a lot of those companies as well as other organizations on that startup journey, identifying exceptional talent. And I'll make a big point about talking about exceptional talent throughout this webinar, because I'm very much of the belief that you do not need to hire lots and lots of people. The idea of bums on seats really doesn't resonate anymore, but finding exceptional talent, that's the key to success. But that doesn't come easy. So I created something called the Talent Advisory Playbook, 5 chapters, and together they build a kind of complete hiring system. For the sake of today, I kind of want to presume that we've already gone through chapter 1, you've done the groundwork, you've defined that there is a role, you've confirmed the business case, and you've kind of mapped the impact of this role. Today is chapter 2, and we're kind of focused on getting in front of the right people and making sure they choose you and your company over your competition. Shroom calls 2026 the era of precision over scale. Early stage startups actually saw a 35% drop in hiring rates coming off the post-COVID-19 peak. And as you will know yourself, boards everywhere want to see hires tied to certain milestones, typically financial milestones. If you then throw in AI, taking more of that repetitive work, when you do hire a human, it really needs to count. So the old playbook of kind of posting a job, screening CVs, picking someone doesn't always work, especially when the person you actually want isn't necessarily looking. That means your story's got to be sharp, because good candidates do have options. And they're definitely asking harder questions before they say yes. You know, as Yiman mentioned, we're in this kind of topsy-turvy world. Lots of these good candidates are potentially passively looking, but then they would potentially be uncertain about wanting to move. So what is it is going to make them move? I think most companies actually put all their energy a little bit in the wrong place. They put a lot of energy into the interview process. They really think a lot about making sure they've got diverse teams, shorter forms, better candidate experience. And whilst that's not wrong, I think it's the wrong problem to solve first. Because by the time a great candidate reaches your application form, there's actually a good chance you've either won or lost them. So for me, the real decision happens before they apply. The hiring process doesn't start when someone submits a CV. It starts when they first hear your name, the company's name. They're already forming a view about what it's like to work for you, whether the role sounds like a step forward, whether you're the kind of company they want to be part of. And most of the time, you have no visibility into that moment at all. And actually, there's a stat that makes this really concrete. 75%, so that's 3 in every 4 candidates, research your employer brand before they ever apply. That data is from LinkedIn's employer brand report. So 3 in 4. So that means the people that looked at you and said, yes, let's apply, Well, that's kind of great. That's brilliant. But what about the ones who looked and quietly walked away? You never knew they were there. They didn't drop out of your process. They never entered it. And I think that's kind of the problem I want to talk about today and potentially how we can fix it. So here's how today's going to work. 4 sections, hopefully each one building on the last. If you're a founder, think about how each section applies to your next hire. If you're an investor, think about how it applies to the companies you back. I don't mean to be glib here. I appreciate it's tough times and really good people are looking for jobs. But the people you most want to hire are typically not on job boards waiting for your ad. To give you an indication, WorkTech tracked job board marketplaces as the #1 funded category in HR tech from 2017 to 2019. But in 2024, it fell to number 11. Peak investment was in 2021, and it's gone considerably down from there. The big job boards, Career Builder, Monster, both went bankrupt. So people have settled doing good work somewhere else and they're not thinking about moving. They're not looking for a job. They're looking for something that's actually worth moving for. Which means the competition isn't about what job boards you post to or what LinkedIn advert you post out. In my opinion, it's about who tells the better story. And that shift in thinking is what this section is actually all about. Think about the last great hire you made, or the best person you've ever worked with. I bet it didn't start with a job board application. Most exceptional hires come through networks, referrals, relationships, built with people who already know what you need or who you need. And also, that's kind of where a great recruiter, and I do mean the word, I put in inverted commas, great recruiter, because not all are in that respect. They're not waiting for the right person to apply. They already know where they are, and they've actually probably got a relationship to get them on the phone to be able to have that conversation. So today I want to talk to you a bit about how you can build that same kind of muscle inside your company. So you're not starting from scratch every time a role opens up. By the time a strong candidate kind of gets on a call, they've already looked you up on LinkedIn. They've checked who else works there. They've probably checked Glassdoor, and they've already started to form a view. So in that case, the interview starts long way before you meet. So in that case, and what I try and say to all the founders that I speak with is, your job isn't just about to hire, it's about being worth hiring before the conversation even begins. Is this company building something that they would be proud of? Do I, as a candidate, do I respect the people who already work there? And what's going to be really key in 2026 onwards is, will I grow faster here than where I am now? And a lot of that kind of comes down to your employer brand. Take a moment and just think about, can you describe, as a founder, your employer brand in one sentence? Not like that product pitch, but what it's actually like to work there. I've seen a lot, and a lot of people write passionate team, innovation, work-life balance. You'll make an impact. But those are the sort of things that can be printed on a hoodie, and it would fit any startup in the world pretty much. What I try and suggest to my founders that I work with is make it really personal. Compare that message I just shared there to something like, we've never lost someone in their first year. People stay because they're still learning. That's specific. That's a real promise of investment. And to me, that's not a bumper sticker, that's a business driver. And the difference matters, because one of those makes a candidate kind of nod, potentially apply, most likely not. And the other makes the right person think, that's exactly the sort of place I want to work. So a strong employer brand isn't about just sounding good. in my opinion, it's the reason someone chooses you over a company potentially offering even more money. So let's go on to your employer value proposition. Most startups have one. It's typically on their website. It's very often in their deck. But the big problem here is your EVP doesn't exist. It shouldn't exist in a deck. It can't just sit there filed away. There are 5 questions you have to seriously ask to make sure that your EVP is working. What can someone do here they couldn't do elsewhere? How does someone get better by being here? What's the honest truth about working here? Who thrives here and who doesn't? And what makes your story the right one for them right now? Now, impact is the most powerful for early stage company. It's the opportunity to really scale on what you're building. The growth, how does someone get better, is what ambitious people need to hear. What's the honest truth about working here is exactly that reality that earns trust with the good candidates. Who thrives here, who doesn't, is the fit which makes people stay. And the why you is what makes them choose you specifically over another competitor. I want to talk briefly about the authenticity advantage. The instinct is to kind of make your company sound appealing to everyone. I see it all the time. Most adverts will say, best place to work. Everyone is welcome. Personal opinion, that's the wrong goal. When you're specific enough to put some people off, you're specific enough to attract the right ones. Specific repels the wrong candidates and it attracts the right ones. That's not a problem. It's kind of what you want to achieve. You do not need to have that hundreds, if not thousands, of applications. So don't be afraid to be authentic. Don't be afraid to say this is not for everyone. It's much more powerful than saying this is the best place to work. And I think on that basis of authenticity, there are 2 questions you can take back to your team tomorrow, later this week. Why are you still here? And what surprised you about this place? What made why is it that you are still here, still thriving, still enjoying this, still coming to work every day with a smile on your face? And then maybe that question about, what surprised you about this place? What have you come that you weren't expecting that is a great surprise for you to have? Or if you're an investor, ask people of the team those 2 questions. And it's those moments that people describe, the specific things that made them stay, the specific things that surprised them in a good way are really compelling. And it's those things that you need to get into the interview process. Coming on to this idea of job adverts, and if you are going to write a job advert, what does it actually look like? Well, most job descriptions actually fail at the first test. The job description, the outreach message, the candidate experience, these 3 things determine whether a good person gets to your interview stage or quietly decides it's not worth the effort. And I'm going to ask you just to think briefly about the last job description you read. Did it make you want the role? Or did it make you want to kind of just move on, close the tab? Most job descriptions I read, if I'm honest, are requirements or kind of shopping lists, typically dressed up in kind of corporate language. They're all about protecting the company, protecting the brand, but they don't really attract the person. And if you think about the importance of that, typically the job description is the first document a candidate sees about the company. And yet it's typically one of the areas that they spend the least amount of time on. Here's what I mean by that. A bad job description says you will be responsible for managing stakeholder relationships across the business. It's bland, it's corporate speak, it could be any organization. A good one really talks about success metrics. In month 3, you'll own the conversation with 3 of our customers. By month 6, you'll be deciding which ones we grow. It's the same role, but it's sending a completely different signal to those candidates who are reviewing it. The question most founders skip is what actually changes because this person joins. And I'm really clear with a lot of the customers that I speak to. If you can't answer that in one sentence, the candidate can't either. Success criteria takes it further. It kind of shows you've thought seriously about what good looks like. And that builds that trust before the first conversation. So if I'd say one thing to take away from today, and you are writing job descriptions, really think about the business impact. What changes because this person joins? And then think about the real success criteria. What happens when this person joins months 1 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 12? And then following on from the job description, you've kind of got the outreach message. Candidates are getting more AI generated outreach than ever. So it means kind of that authentic human connection now stands out even more, which means your personal visibility is even more important. And that's becoming the differentiator. Good candidates get at least 10 messages a week, if not more. And most start with things like, I came across your profile. In the world that I work in and very good internal talent functions as well as good hiring managers, they all know this, the ones that land are specific. They really reference the individual they want to hire. They think about what that person has done. And they make sure that those messages are actually tailored to that individual, rather than it being a generic templated message. So again, if I'm going to offer any advice, I would say do fewer messages, but do them better. Make sure they are really written and researched. And I guarantee you'll get a lot greater responses. Not everyone's going to come back and say, yes, I want to apply. Lots of people can be very happy where they are, but the chance of you actually getting an initial connection will be much, much higher if they feel like they've been actually personalized. And that kind of goes back onto that candidate experience. Good candidates are making judgments at every stage. How quickly you respond, whether you follow up, what the process communications are about and how you operate. And again, I know every founder is really, really busy, but honestly, silence kills. And a week without contact is really a week where a lot of candidates potentially move on. So I appreciate it's a catch-22. Yeah, I often hear we want to hire, but we don't have the capacity to interview people. It's valid, and I genuinely understand the pain points, but the candidate won't typically see it that way. So really do think, if you are going to invest the time and the effort into identifying the right people, please, please, please make sure that you give yourself the time to be able to connect with them. Quite often, these people won't want to enter into an interview process immediately. They'll want to go for a coffee first of all. So you need to make sure that you've got the time to be able to do that side of things. I want to touch briefly on AI, which is quite surprising that we haven't really talked too much about it and we are already 25 minutes in. But it is changing what the hiring process looks like. But it's not necessarily changing what great hiring actually is. Candidates are using AI to write applications. Candidates are using AI to ensure that they can apply to multiple applications. I read a report this weekend that said 48% of candidates don't even look at the job specification when they are applying, which is a worry. But it just gave you an indication of how much is actually done in AI. And then founders and hiring managers are using it to screen them, which means kind of both sides risk going through the motions without really getting a good indication of whether that candidate is the right hire for you or you are the right company for them. So again, I say to the founders or their leaders, use AI, but don't let it replace the human judgment piece. Use it to research a candidate, sure. Use it even to draft the first version of a job description, no problem with that. Potentially even use it to prep your interview questions. But the time when someone decides whether to trust you within the next 3 years of their life, that has to be that human connection. That has to be that human interaction. And to the investors who are joining this panel, I say the companies that are getting this right around their hiring are using AI to move faster without cutting corners. They're not losing the human in that process. Okay, so let's just recap a bit. You've got the story, you've sorted your job description, your outreach is now sharper. Everything in those kind of last two sections is about making sure the right people notice you when they're looking. But here's the thing, the person who'd be perfect for your next hire, there's a good chance they're not looking at all. They're not refreshing job boards. They're settled somewhere. They're doing great work. And they're not even actively thinking about a move. That's where the shadow funnel, and this is how you kind of get into it. So think about how you got your current role or the last time you made a really great hire. It's the shadow funnel. It's almost always the conversations, the referrals, the warm introductions, the communities. And I would challenge you to really say, how much are you actually doing of that? How many conversations are you having about candidates that may you not even be actively looking for right now, but you may need in 6 or 12 months' time? How many communities are you joining in that respect? Really, really think about that shadow funnel. Really think about potential candidates that may not be right for you right now, but could be amazing for your company in 6 to 12 months' time. And think about how you can build that. And so where are these people? Well, they're typically in communities. You'll find them in Slack groups. They respond to newsletters. They definitely follow podcasts. You should be able to meet them at events. If you're speaking at conferences or attending conferences or dinners or roundtables. And then speak to people that you know, former colleagues, but just constantly always do think about having the opportunity to meet exceptional talent and always keep that not necessarily front of mind, but always keep that in mind when you are at these conferences, you are at these dinners, you are at these round tables. Is there someone there that I'd like to meet? Is there someone there that I'd like to go and have a coffee with and to potentially discuss future opportunities? And look, I think your best hires often come from relationships, that every time you share what you're building, what you're learning, what problem you're working on, you're making a connection. It won't feel like recruiting, but 6 months when you need to hire, the right people typically know who you are. So I very much believe the founder who shares openly, should I say, also builds a pipeline of talent. I would also say in today's world, a lot of candidates that I speak to are thinking about the company they're joining way before they're even thinking about leaving where they are. So they are looking at podcasts. They are looking at what speaking events you are doing. They are looking at newsletters that you are circulating. So just again, think about those different touch points. And look, I'll give you a really good example. I placed someone with a Series A prop tech back end of last year, and the candidate was not actively looking. But we got into a conversation through a referral, and it happened that he had just recently been to an event where one of the speakers was actually from that company. He loved what they were doing, loved the fact that it was really out there, cutting edge technology, and it made that conversation so much easier. So again, would we replace this candidate? Possibly. Was it hugely helped by the fact that he had just come from an event where he really liked what they saw? 100%. So do think about that as well. But just kind of before I kind of conclude, and feel free to ask any questions, I've kind of hopefully covered the framework. There's four sections and there's four different ways this can break down. And I think the real question is, which one is costing you the most right now? So I would say do an audit. Three areas, one honest score, each out of five. Can you genuinely say in one sentence why the right person should choose you? That's your story. Do your job descriptions really invite the person who isn't already looking? And are you in the communities your next hire actively lives in? And then your lowest score is where you need to work first. So think about that. Think about those three areas. Score yourself out of five. Very happy to do this with you, by the way. This doesn't need to be something that you need to do on your own. I'm really happy to support. But then pick the one that's costing you the most. If you need to fix your story, work on that. If your job descriptions are not really getting the right people, think about where you can improve your job descriptions. Or fix your visibility. Help make sure that hire finds you before the role even goes live. And I think all these things compound. This is not a quick fix. This is not something that's necessarily going to happen overnight. But if you get your story right, you write job descriptions that are genuinely interesting to the right candidates, and you fix your visibility. So you are in the spaces where you want to attract that talent, you will start identifying exceptional talent. So one change done well does compound. The last bit I want to do is talk a little bit more to the investors who are on this webinar. But equally, the founders should listen into this, because these are the questions sharp investors will definitely ask you. The due diligence questions aren't hypothetical. If you're back in the early stage companies, hiring capability is one of the clearest signals of founder quality. So, a founder who can't articulate why someone would join them, who hasn't mapped out their talent competition, who only really starts building relationships when a role goes live, that's a risk signal. And look, we talk about this. I think I've joined quite a few due diligence calls. There's a lot of founder pitches when you hear them talk about, we're going to hire 10 people in 8 weeks, and we've got no fees aside for it, and it's going to cost us X amount per person. But those are worrying signals. So just think a bit about that. And then post-investment, these are the ones boards are most often, the boards really want to know about: the time to hire, the quality of hire, alongside commercial metrics. And referral rate, I think, is a really interesting one. I don't know how many of you actually look at your referral rate from either the companies that you run or from the companies that you invest in. But it's a really clearer signal of culture and retention. And I don't think it's used enough, if I'm honest with you. And then finally, the EVP question is the one that catches kind of scaling companies out. You've got to think what works for 10 people won't necessarily work when you're 50 plus. So your EVP needs to evolve as well. And I'll say to founders on this call, if you can answer these questions clearly, you're definitely ahead of most companies at your stage. And if you can't, now's a good time to start. So look, before I kind of wrap up, we've covered a lot. I've covered employer branding, job descriptions, outreach, sourcing, and your hiring process. And if you're thinking, I know which bits apply to me, but I'm not sure necessarily where to start, look, that's what I'm here for. I am the talent partner to Angel Academy, and I'm definitely here to support. I have created a hiring maturity assessment. It's a free 5-minute diagnostic, and it benchmarks your approach across 5 areas that we've kind of discussed today. And it provides a personalized roadmap based on where you are right now, but equally how you can get to the next stage as well. And I say for founders, it's really the fastest way to turn what you've heard today into a clear next step. The QR code's on the next slide. Take 5 minutes, worth doing it this week and having a look. So finally, everything we've covered today comes down to one thing, in my opinion. The best people have options. They're not waiting to be found. They're waiting to be impressed. They're going to be impressed by your story, your clarity, your process, and how you make them feel from the very first touch point. That candidate experience, that candidate journey, getting them to that offer stage, getting them to onboarded, is the clearest indication to those candidates of how they're going to feel working for you. So there was a question, I think, in the LinkedIn post about, how much does this all cost? Genuinely, you don't need a big hiring budget to do this well. You need to be intentional. But the companies that get this right at this early stage, they're the ones who treat hiring as a strategic capability rather than just being a reactive task. And in my opinion, those are the ones that build the biggest competitive advantage. So feel free to book a conversation with me. Feel free to do the hiring maturity. And thank you for your time. Very happy to answer any questions. And back over to you, Ima, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Robin. That was really, really insightful, I think. So I've been speaking to some people over last week and stuff, and I had a couple of questions around what you were talking about. And Mary also has a question. I think let's take Mary's question first. Sounds like a full-time job, which is yes, I think it really does. So she says that in their hiring processes, they like to look for good cultural fit, which is really difficult to assess. Do you suggest anything like personality profiling, or are there better ways to do that?
So, look, first of all, yes, it can be a full-time job, and yes, it will feel more like that. But if you tackle it early, Mary, it will feel a lot less like that as you go through the process. As I said, this isn't a quick fix overnight. This can work, but if you put the processes in place, put the right frameworks in place, actually, as the months go through, actually it becomes a lot easier. Going back to that kind of culture fit, again, I would actually think about it's your messaging, it's your branding, making sure you're really attracting the right people. It goes back to that point I made, which is saying, don't say this is the best place to work for everyone. Be really specific about the sort of people that you want to hire within the organization, and that is aligned to the culture fit. Personality profiling, yeah, I think there'll be people that I think if you had a room full of 100 people, you could probably find 50 people, that would say it's great and it's fantastic. You probably find 50 that would say it isn't. I think, Mary, in all honesty, that comes down to spending time with those individuals. And this is where I really do appreciate it's tricky, but I would say try and do this before you're actively hiring for that role. Try and meet some of these people when you know that there's a role like this going to be coming up in the next maybe 2 to 3 months. And you'll start being able to just have a coffee conversation with someone, or a half-hour Zoom call on a Friday or something like that, where it's not really eating in so much into your day-to-day work, and you'll really be able to assess whether they're the right culture fit for you.
So this kind of leads me into a question, right? Because it's almost like subconscious or conscious just intentional pre-hiring before the hiring, right? And so how do you suggest a founder with all of this limited time and budget manages that shadow funnel for themselves? Like, what do you think the time commitment is, and how do they manage the admin of that shadow funnel when they're not really in the recruitment process?
Yeah. It's a fair point. But I think this is where if you're constantly always on and you're
Mm.
always thinking, could this person I'm speaking to today potentially be a future employee, right? And you're constantly thinking that all the time, then it just becomes a lot easier, you man. You're meeting people all the time. You're, attending events, you're attending roundtables, you're going out for, academic events or anything along those lines. You are meeting people all the time. And if you're constantly thinking about, the person who's in front of you, could they potentially be a future employee?
Mm.
Then it's not taking anything away from your normal time. You're just being doing. Now, where do you store that information? That's a fair point. Um, there are applicant tracking systems that are very reasonably priced, or you typically will have a CRM or anything like that. I would say store it because
Yeah.
certainly for me, I'm afraid I will forget certain people's faces, names, everything like that. So I do like to go away and actually store information. So I would suggest that's a good idea. But you'll typically know the people, you'll speak to them within 15 to 20 minutes. You'll know whether that's someone that you would like to have another conversation with or not. If it is, ask them. I
Mm.
would say, should we have another coffee sometime?
Maybe that's the filter. Like, oh, if they get back in touch with you in a couple of months, then they're showing initiative, and actually, that's a good thing.
It is, but also just do think this. I've worked with lots of companies, you Matt.
Yeah.
I still feel a lot of organizations, and I'm certainly not saying this is actually many Angel Academy founders, because I think actually they do think slightly differently, but a lot more corporate organizations always presume candidates want to work for them.
Mm.
And they never really think about the idea that it's a two-way process. So, yes, you might think, oh, I'll wait for that person to get back in touch with me. But that person may never get back in touch with you until you actually are proactive.
Mm.
Say, I would like to have that conversation.
So yeah, that I suppose it does separate the founders who attract the exceptional people from the founders who might struggle to hire.
And look, this is the point, right? Everything I've shared today is talking about exceptional talent.
Yeah.
And I think actually, in some respects, we're in an easier world to attract that exceptional talent because everything is actually about, you know, a smaller number of hires and actually being really, really thoughtful around who you're bringing into the organization. And that's happening across the board.
Mm.
You roll this to the zero interest rate period of 2010 to 2020, when it was, let's get as many people in as possible. It was really hard to be very proactive and very much circumspect around, I want to hire these sort of people. Now you're in a world where investors are saying, we only want you to hire people that are going to make a real difference to your organization. You've got a lot more opportunity to be really strategic around that hiring pipeline. And I still don't think people have quite picked onto that just yet.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I think the intentionality piece is the piece that's really missing.
Yeah. And look, the other thing I want to, caveat this with is if you don't hire exceptional
Yeah.
and you hire mediocre,
Oh, what happens?
what's the cost of that? It's huge. I mean, the
Yeah.
cost of let's just go, before we go to a mediocre hire, the cost of a mishire, so someone that you actually don't keep within your organization, is typically the industry average is talks somewhere around 1.5 to 3 times that person's annual salary. But, once you factor in the management time, team disruption, the delay and the process of actually then going out and getting the right person,
Yeah.
the cultural damage, Mary talked about culture and everything being so important. In you're a 10-person company and you get one bad hire, that's 10% of your company that's going in the wrong direction. That's a scary number, right? So don't get me wrong, a mishire is bad in any organization. it can be, and I don't mean to be alarmist, it could be terminal in smaller companies. You make multiple mishires. And then you talk about mediocre hires, and those are the people that will just get on and do the job, and they see it very much as that kind of 9 to 5, but they're not really the hires that are going to really accelerate the growth of your business.
Hmm.
And there's lots of stats out there, and I can find them. But they talk about exceptional talent can be sometimes anything up to 800% the value of a mediocre person. They can ship faster. They can help you raise quicker. They bring great talent in themselves. They themselves are magnets.
Yeah, they're
So again,
multipliers.
yeah. So again, I'd say, if you're looking at I mean, this is going to sound crazy from someone who's involved in hiring people and being recruited, but I would say genuinely look at your hiring plans and be really, really conscious around each one of those. What is the business metric? What is the impact that person's going to have? What do the success metrics look like? And why do I need that hire now? And if you really can't answer that with conviction, then I would say don't go forward with that just yet until you can answer those clearly.
No, that's fair. Well, if they need advice on that, they know where to go.
They can. And look, I love this. I love being able to advise startup, scale up founders. I love being able to share what's going on. It is a bit of a crazy world. There is no obvious talent trend out there right now. There's a
Mm,
lot of conflicting areas. The one thing I would say, the one thing that is quite clear is companies are definitely hiring less and companies are definitely trying to hire better. So that's
yep.
your competition doing that. You need to do the same. And to do the same, you need to be very mindful of those hires and you need to put a bit of time into it, right? Again, not to be disrespectful, but lots of people put a lot of time into decks, pitch decks, investment decks, and I completely understand why. But I've then seen founders get their investment and then suddenly go, we're going to hire 10 people. And suddenly I come back to them and find out that 5 of those people have left that organization already. And they've eaten up a huge chunk of that investment because they didn't put that time and effort in. So
Yeah.
I would say put the time in, put the investment in, work either yourself and with the other founders and other hiring managers, or lean on experts, who can support you in that respect.
Very cool. Well, Robin, I think we'll leave it at that.